Hi everyone, I'm Karen MacNeil, author of the Wine Bible and editor of the free digital newsletter Wine Speed. And this is the Great Wines of Oakville, episode number 7. In fact, the final episode. It's kind of like the final frontier, I guess. We want to thank you all for being here and also say a special thank you and an appreciation for everyone who is carefully, I hope, involved in the tumultuous events in our country right now. We're very hopeful for everyone's and praying for everyone's safety involved. So again, thank you. Today, we are going to explore, of course, what makes Oakville so pivotal, so compelling, and the wines so delicious. And let me tell you who's here with us. Hamilton Nicholsen is the winemaker for Kelham. There he is. Aaron Miller is the winemaker for Plump Jack. There he is. And Lindsay Hoopes, just joining us now, I think, is, we have her on the line, is the owner of Hoopes Winery. And we're going to get to the wines in a second. I've been tasting them for the last few minutes. I'm coming to you live from my kitchen in the Napa Valley. Extraordinary wines, you'll see. But before we start tasting, I'd like to just put up a quick map, which we've always done in our Oakville series, just because it's good to, I think, have a moment of context. And so there you see Oakville outlined in green. We're right in the heart of the Napa Valley here, about 5 miles across and 2 miles north to south. And there you see the north-south Highway 29, which I'm sure many people have been on. So let's see, let's go over to Kelham first, to Ham's Winery. And there you see it, just below Martha's Vineyard, tucked right up against the Mayacamas Mountains there. And then we'll go to Hoopes, and going across Highway 29 here, more to the center, there you see Hoopes Vineyard, right just south of Napa Wine Company there, and Gamble family north of it. And then we'll go over to Plump Jack, which is also on the east side on the Oakville Crossroad. We should be getting to it pretty soon. There it is, right above, right north of Bond St. Eden, and near Rudd Estate and Turnbull's, Fortuna Vineyard. So now we have some context of where the wineries are. So we'll get to your histories in a minute, everyone. But first, I wanted to ask a sort of a bigger picture question, I guess, because today we're tasting some of the oldest wines we've tasted thus far in this series. We have Kelham's 2012 and Plump Jack's 2013. So 2 of the 3 wines is a little bit older. So my question is, Oakville wines are known for their capacity to age. And the reason that's important is even if you drink the wines now, right, the fact that they can age is always a sign of excellence in wine. I mean, a lot of people wonder about that. They're like, well, I'm not going to age it anyway. Why do I care? You do care because the capacity to age is in and of itself important, even if you don't age it. Age it, meaning age the wine. My question to all of you is, what is it about Oakville that allows the wines to age so beautifully?
Who would you like for us?
Aaron, you have something to.
Sure. I think that what's important about these wines, all of these wines, and many of the Oakville wines that I've tasted over the years, What gives it the ability to age is its balance, its harmony. It's has power, but finesse and elegance. It has beautiful natural acidity. I think it has all the elements and all the components that one needs for aging. They have a lot of fruit on the nose and can take some oak to balance the fruit and the oak and make a really exciting and complex wine that has everything that you do need to get a great age.
So you'd put it down to structure then, to the idea of balance, but also acidity and tannin. Yeah.
Balance, acidity, tannin, the structure of the wine, and also, like I said, the aromatics. There's so much fruit available just out of the fermenter that you can use some oak for aging that will help to balance and add a lot of complexity. And I think that they work well together, and and the fruit lasts, and the oak is a nice complement.
Ham, what about you, Hamilton?
I think we're able to keep acidity is the number one thing. Get ripeness with acidity. If we're able to balance the wine with that for vintage, and we're so blessed with such an easy environment for growing really in California, compared to Bordeaux, where they get 1 and 8 that are just the perfect balance of everything. We're Shangri-La here. That's really, we're lucky.
I forgot to mention that we are taking questions, and I hope after that comment we don't have like 1,000 people from Bordeaux right hitting the question button saying, hey, hey.
It's just harder for them, I think. But we're just blessed with such a great growing environment that to have acidity, ripeness, all the complexities in the wines that come through in our fermentations, a lot of natural yeast in the area that is good. I think that's a big thing.
And acidity is, of course, along with tannin, one of the great preservatives, natural preservatives of wine. Lindsay, what about your thoughts on this? Oh, we can't hear you.
Now?
Yes.
I hear you now.
Okay,
yes.
Perfect. Sorry if I look a little silly in the microphone. I guess I have to get closer. But I would say that Oakville, I don't want to call it an easy place to grow, but because we're dominantly on the valley floor and we have an extremely consistent heat source throughout the year, there's very little shading, there's very little benchlands, to be honest with you. Most of it is sort of right in the center. We have an ability to ripen the fruit very, very extensively. So you're bringing out all of those rich flavor profiles, the phenolics, and also the tannin structures. So they have the right amount of time to develop and develop in balance. And we don't always run into problems close to the harvest season that require us to pull earlier than we want or later than we want. Of course we do, but it's not as acute as it is in some other wine growing regions. So I think that we have, to some extent, the luxury in most seasons to sort of find that triangulate balance of phenolics, acid, and grist that you don't necessarily always get the perfect combination of in some of these varietals. Cabernet specifically, I think really benefits from that. And so when you get that right balance, you're able to age it for a long time because everything is sort of in tune with the other components.
It's really shades of nuance, isn't it? Because there are a lot of wines in the world, of course, that have acidity, that have tannin, that have some measure of balance. And to me, those are all important and they're very knowable things. But there's also some mystery in the end. If you look at all the great wines in the world and why those great wines age, circumstances are always a little bit different. So there's some little thing we don't quite, or little things we don't quite know yet. But thank God they do age, right? Because it makes them so delicious to taste. And we'll get to that in a moment. I want to, though, go into histories for a little bit. Lindsay, I want to start with you because I have to say, when I was reading your bio, I was getting tired reading your bio. You are such an accomplished person. Oh my God. Advanced degrees in law and business and wine and just you were the district attorney, the assistant district attorney of San Francisco. I mean, I hope you're breathing. I hope you're sleeping. I mean, it's hard to believe you are, given that resume, but you took over Hoopes from your father, I believe. And tell us briefly the story of how Hoopes came to be.
Well, I would say a lot of luck. My father actually moved to Napa Valley after being stationed in the military in San Francisco at the Presidio. And he was from a farming community. He was not familiar with grapes, but he'd want to move back to the country, to the earth. And so Napa was sort of the closest place he found land. And at the time, it wasn't an obvious place to move, and it wasn't an obvious place even to grow grapes. So that was in 1981. We ended up moving from the fog. He wanted some extra heat and really spoke to neighbors about what we thought we should grow. And there were a lot of prune trees and citrus farms and a number of other agricultural products. But some people sort of thought grapes would be the next wave. And again, I laugh now because everything is planted grapes, but it wasn't so obvious then. And so now we're surrounded, but we were sort of one of the first plots of land on this property, although we had some very long-standing grape growers in the Napa Valley down the road, the Palissa family. We've lived next to them for over 40 years, and they said, why don't you grow grapes? We're kind of doing pretty well with that at the moment, and that's how we got into the business. As far as my transition, you know, I always figured I'd come back to the family business, but actually father grew quite ill very suddenly, and that kicked transition in gear a little bit earlier than expected. But I'm very glad I came home, and we live together now, and I have 2 kids under 3, so we've got a multi-generational family living on the property and continuing the legacy.
Very cool, very cool. Hamilton, let's go to you, because I understand that Kelham was part of Vine Hill Ranch, tucked right up against the Mayacamas there, right below Harlan. It's a beautiful property that you sort of look up as you're driving into the Napa Valley, and you look up at the Mayacamas, and there are those vineyards. Tell us when Kelham began.
So my stepfather's parents bought the ranch in the late 50s. They were dairy farmers and cattle farmers in West Marin, and their property was condemned by the federal government. And they sold it and got some money for it, but then bought the ranch where they are now. So it is what is Point Reyes National Seashore, was part of their property, and Kelham Beach is still out there, which is kind of neat. So for my dad's birthday one year, we all went out there, and the stories were just crazy. He grew up out there, but he loved the ranching part of the world, and farming was his main thing growing up. And he was a farmer. He never wanted to have a winery growing up. He always said, we'll never own a winery. I dislike winemakers, and go out, get a degree, it's always going to be here. And so we did. And but the ranch itself was partitioned when I was in high school, and his sister, and he partitioned the ranch, and it was mutual. They had different ideas and different things. And then my father sold Andy Beckstoffer, which is now the Missouri Hopper Vineyard, well, and he bought a ranch up in Montana at the time as well. So he was happy to do everything that he's done, and we're very fortunate to have where we are. It's a beautiful
property. Yeah, it's a beautiful
It had been backbone of the Georgia for over 50 years.
Yeah.
So they were really fortunate.
Aaron, we want to hear about Plump Jack because, of course, it is owned in part by our California Governor, Gavin Newsom. And Aaron, I have to say, you have a vino girl here, so women are already writing in. Aaron, my favorite enologist, when he was one. At first I thought it said when he was young, but it says when he was one in the whole wide world. Woo, okay, guy. But Plump Jack,
probably a former It might be Joanne, a former.
No private names here.
Oh, no. A former coworker when I was at Hoopes Vineyards and Winery next door to Plump Jack, which is where I started my career in the Napa Valley as the enologist. Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about Plump Jack, because it was the famous Villa Mount Eden. It's a very old estate in the Napa Valley, right? Going back to the 1880s, I think.
Right, the 1880s. The estate has been planted to vines for over a century now. I think, from what I understand, during Prohibition, there was a period where it went back to fruit trees and nut trees, but it was planted back to vineyards in the mid 1900s, and Plump Jack took over that property in 1995, and the vision at that time wasn't really set in stone. It was kind of a new developing a project for Gavin Newsom and Gordon Getty. And at that time, they were, prior to that, they were running a wine shop out of San Francisco and some restaurants. So their model was quite different from a winery. And so we had, 18 different wines that we were selling. Sangiovese, Petit Syrah, Cabernet Sauvignon, a few Chardonnays, Syrah, Merlot, just all over the board. And we didn't have some focus. And it wasn't until a few years later that we realized that what was important to what was the estate and the fruit on the estate, and that Cabernet Sauvignon. So we started to focus on the Cabernet Sauvignon, got rid of most of the other varietals, and really started to focus on that property because it's such a beautiful and superb property with so much complexity, being so close to the Mayacamas Mountains, or the Vaca Mountains on the other side. Being on basically an old landslide, which has created so many different soil strata throughout the property, which gives us so many different expressions of Cabernet Sauvignon, and gives me a lot to work with for blending and for crafting these wines.
Yeah, so we have got to ask, and I know you probably can't tell us the truth, but does Gavin Newsom have a good palate?
Oh, he has a great palate. Yeah.
Seriously, a great palate? You never say to yourself.
Well, he started working. He started a wine shop when he was 22 years old because he loved wine, and so he's been tasting wine and enjoying wine for much of his life.
Well, a toast then to our governor, Gavin Newsom, for his extraordinary palate. Well, speaking of tasting, then let's do this tasting. And again, if you have questions and comments, please join us. The question button, Q&A button, is at the bottom of your screen. So I want to start, Hamilton, I'm going to start with your Kelham, because first of all, it's the oldest. It's the 2012 in this set. And at first, when you sent it, I thought, how are you even sending this? Because this wine isn't released yet. You have a very unusual, I guess it's unusual, policy of only releasing a wine, a Cabernet, after 10 years.
Cabernet Merlot, and believe it or not, Sauvignon Blanc.
Whoa. Okay, you got to send me that Sauvignon Blanc. I have to taste that. But so why 10 years? Not why wait? Because I guess we can imagine why wait. But why 10 years? How did you settle on that number?
Do more of a fresh style of winemaking, so a little more tannin, a little more acidity to the wines. But what we've done was we realized that age integrates the flavors, softens, makes a better quality wine. A lot of our clients don't have wine cellars anymore. They might have a wine refrigerator that has 10 bottles in it and in their kitchen in Manhattan, whatever it might be. But people don't have 100, 200 bottle wine cellars in general across the country. So we're aging the wines for people. So when they get the wines, they can enjoy them, or they can age them another 10 years. We know that they have the ability to age 20, 25 years from the wines that were made off the property in the past. So that's something that we chose, the style that Andre Chalachev and George de la Tour did with our fruit in the 50s and 60s.
Yes, and these were two of the pivotal men in the history of Napa Valley. Georges de la Tour, the founder of Hoopes Vineyard, and Andre Chalachev, a actual Russian emigre who had worked at the Pasteur Institute, who's considered the father of Napa Valley winemaking. And both of them did believe, as you're saying, in aging wine for a considerable amount of time before release.
Most definitely.
Yeah, tell us what you think about this wine. I'll tell you what I think, but first I want to hear what you think.
Well, I love Merlot. I've kind of backed off from Cabernet personally. I think that every time, I know, Aaron, when we go to parties, things like that, everybody brings a bottle of Cabernet, and we've got 20 bottles. We're fortunate enough to drink great wine here, but they're all Cabernet, and so this is Merlot-based wine. I think it's soft and supple. I think it has just a touch of tannin. I think when it was younger, it showed much bigger tannin. We're very fortunate that the Merlot off the property has a little bit of that meaty consistency to it, so it has almost like a raw beef smell to it. It should have that.
That's
as well
lovely.
as a little bit of root beer on top of that. So it's something that I really enjoy about Merlot. I like the earthiness of that.
Beef and root beer, those are two really interesting descriptors, because I think sometimes with especially really structured Napa Valley, either Cabernet or Merlot, the wine itself is like a steak. There's like sort of crusty outside and then this juicy, soft middle center. That's a wonderful, wonderful description.
Well, you've got your cooked chard, you've got your center of the medium rare. It's all those things together make it such a great experience.
We've got a question coming in from Tom about the barrels in this wine, and then we're going to go to Aaron. But tell us what type of barrels you use here.
So Dijon Gigal, there's a little bit Sauvignon as well as Marquez, and then typically I'm a real big fan of Fontainebleau as a forest.
So these are all new French, excuse me.
All French oak.
Not necessarily
and this wine is probably 70% new.
Okay, good. Aaron, let's go to you, this 2013, and please, one of the things that we always do in our Oakville series is everybody has all of the wines, meaning all three of you and me too. I hope I'm not the only one tasting all of these because they're so delicious. Aaron, let's go to you. But first, I don't know, Aaron, another woman writing in. Tell us about the Vintage of Love. Okay, tell us about the Vintage of Love.
That may be Suzanne Groff. So I met my wife at Groff Vineyards and Winery in 2016. I was the enologist, and my wife Kelly was the cellar intern. So we met then, and over the course of a few years, she and I developed a relationship and got married. So we call it the Vintage of Love.
Ah. And what, pray tell, is the Vintage of Love? Which year was that?
That was 2006, I'm sorry.
2006, a great vintage, indeed.
Yeah.
All right. Well, tell us about this 2013 Plump Jack. This, by the way, Plump Jack really surprised the world, I would say, with its 1997 vintage, when it bottled half of the vintage in screw caps and half in cork. In 1997, that was a really super courageous thing to do for a wine that cost more than $100 a bottle. And the screw cap wines actually were priced a little bit higher, if I remember, than the cork finished wine. So I want to know about what you think about this 2013 right now, 7 years later, but also how has that screw cap 1997 wine done?
Well, I'll start with the screw cap question. We did start with screw caps in the 1997 vintage, bottling them in 2000. We were really the first winery to use screw caps on a luxury, what's classified as a luxury wine. And we've had a lot of success with it. We did it because we were concerned about cork taint issues and, having our own winery, but also serving wine in restaurants, we were seeing a lot of cork taints, and Gordon Getty, one of our owners, was actually the one that kind of started this experiment, this great experiment that he calls it. And we really wanted to see how our wines would do under screw cap, and we started bottling half and half for the Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon. And we've seen that the wines age really well, and we found that these older wines, these 97s and these more advanced aged wines, they retain freshness a little longer. Aromatically, they have a little bit more fruit on the nose for a longer period. The palate still develops really well, really beautifully, and I found that it's a great closure because it does allow the wine to age. It's a little bit slower. It is a little bit slower, but it does age really well, and you don't have to worry about laying a bottle down for 10, 20, 25 years and opening up a cork tainted wine. And that was really the goal. So.
And people forget, actually, that back in 1997, in the 90s, the incidence of cork taint was much higher than it is today. I mean, today it's maybe around 2%, but back then I remember the figures were 8%, 5 to 8%. So it was more than double the amount of corked wine back then than it is today.
Right, and 8% is one bottle out of every case, and that's a big. You know, as far as investments for, you know, the winery or for consumers, you know, people buying the wines, it's a lot to lose. Yeah.
So tell me about this 2013. This wine is tasting deliciously right now.
Thank you. The 2013 this is my second vintage at Plump Jack Winery, and it was just an unreal vintage. It was for Plump Jack. It was our first Wine Advocate 100-point wine, and which was a big milestone and very exciting, especially for me. But it's just the growing conditions were just perfect in the vintage. It was one of those maybe our second drought year in our 5-year run of drought, and the character that we got from our wines in that vintage were big and bold and just really incredible, really a lot of intensity, fruit aromatic intensity. The structure was really big, especially upon barrel aging and early release, but has started to resolve really well. And the structure is really well integrated. The acid is beautiful. It's got just lots of fruit on the nose: blueberries, blackberries, raspberry cassis. It's aged in 100% new oak for about 24 months, and I think that the oak just is very subtle, a very subtle complement to the wine. And what I love about this wine is what I love about many Oakville wines is just that silky texture, that silky tannin. Yeah, it's just really fine and velvety, and the length just keeps going forever. So it's one of my favorite wines.
I love the fact that we have. I love the fact that we have Kelham's 2012 and your 2013, because these were two very different vintages, but both displaying what Hamilton was saying earlier, this underlying core of just languorous, beautiful, velvety fruit. Two of my favorite older vintages. I want to go to Lindsay's wine, and I should have held up the Plump Jack here with its signature bottle. And Plump Jack, of course, is a reference to the Shakespearean character Falstaff, who drinks all kinds of wine in every play that he's in. He drinks specifically sack, S-A-C-K-E, which I notice in your public relations, Aaron, you translate as wine, but it's actually sherry. Sack means sherry, not exactly wine. But I know you're not making sherry, so you didn't want to confuse people. All right, do we have Lindsay back? Lindsay, do we have you?
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent. Okay, so let's taste this Hoopes.
Birthday, so I had to get him out of the room.
Okay. Let's taste your Hoopes, which is one of the very big recent vintages, 2015. The 15s and the 16s are right now on the market. But I'm curious what you think about this wine, about its flavors and how it feels and its structure. How do you describe it?
Well, we've been producing off of this particular vineyard since 1983. So these are the oldest contiguous vines in Oakville. It's a single vineyard wine. And so for me, it's very much a nostalgic wine. It was the first wine that we ever made. But we are very consistent year over year. So we don't see as much vintage variation. We're not blending from another of different vineyards. So how I would describe this particular flavor profile, I mean, I think it's very quintessentially Oakville. It has a lot of that sort of earthy and dustiness, but it has a lot of the strong cassis and bright red fruit flavors. And we're sort of smack dab in the middle of Oakville, smack dab, well, we're on the southernmost part of Oakville, but right in the middle of Highway 29, Silverado Trail. So we're sort of right at the bullseye, just above Yountville Hill. And so we do have a little bit of shade, but more or less we get very consistent sun. So it brings out that really, really bright red, dark fruit, but there's tobacco, there's some of those masculine elements. And I think, I don't know how familiar you are with our team, but we're an entirely female-owned and operated winery. And I think that in some vintages, what you'll see in our more current vintages from 2012 on is that I think Ann Botter and Jennifer Rue do an amazing job at harnessing in some of those masculine qualities and giving it a real sensuality. So kind of toning them down, not muting them, but I think really making them more of a blended heuristic as opposed to standing out. So, you know, I like to think of it as a very sexy wine.
A woman's team making masculine wines. I don't know. I think I'd take the opportunity to mute it down just for the hell of it. No, I'm teasing. Sorry. Sorry guys. Okay. I'll stop. That is interesting though. And I know Ann Botter, your winemaker, actually is a protege of Heidi Barrett, I think, right?
That's correct. So interestingly, Anne worked under Heidi. I think they have very different styles, but she's learned, you know, from one of the most iconic female winemakers in the industry. And Jennifer Rue, who's also our head winemaker, worked at Napa Wine Company and actually helped a number of the Oakville wineries develop their brands and through the crush facility there. So she's worked with pretty much every winery and every vineyard in the Oakville region and chose to work with us because of this particular site. It's very uniquely composed of a number of the geologic attributes of the rest of the valley because we're at the base of the floodplains in Oakville. Yeah. So the floods, as they come in, actually basically take all of the soils from all of Oakville and then lie down at the base of Yountville Hill. Yeah. So you get a lot of diversity within a pretty small space, and I think that's what makes it very special. We harvest this wine in 14 different sections. So for those of you wine lovers that don't know what that means, it means that we make basically 14 different wines and then end up blending it. And although we know the vineyard very well in any given vintage, we do have different flavor profiles that present that become the dominant profile depending on what is working best in any given vintage.
Let me interject here with because several people are asking questions. Let me start with one of the most practical of them, asked by Nano, it looks like, Pedraza, which is what stems we're all using. I mean, we're all tasting. And I had asked Erin this earlier, and Erin, I think you're using a Riedel Cabernet glass. Hamilton, what are you using?
I'm using the same one as Erin, the Riedel Magnum glass, the cab glass that they do.
And Lindsay, are you tasting? Sorry.
Yes, that's my glass out at the last location. I had to change for Wi-Fi reasons, but yes, it's the same. It's the Riedel Cabernet glass.
All right, everybody needs to get a little bit more creative. I'm not using the Cabernet glass. Let me get it here. This is actually Riedel's Syrah glass. So it is Riedel, although we have several in our office. We have several other wine glass manufacturers in addition to Riedel. But anyway, this is the Syrah glass, which after lots and lots of tasting, I find works best for Oakville. You'll have to give it a try. All right, our next question. When you decided for Aaron, when you decided to be pioneers and use screw caps, would you have predicted that today the industry would have started to pursue other types of innovations like cans? I hope, no, tell me Oakville is not going to cans. Really, really, I mean, I can't live if Oakville is going to cans, please. Screw caps, good, but.
No, of course not. I don't think back in 1997 we were predicting people would be using cans and kegs for wine, but they are, and I think that they're probably appropriate for some wines. I don't know that I don't think that they'd be appropriate for our wines, just because we do need to have some oxygen ingress. We need to have some air go through the closure and into the wine to help the wine evolve. And cork obviously allows that, and so do screw caps. It's a lower rate, but it does allow it as well.
Yeah, yeah. So let me ask, let's talk about an idea that I think Hamilton sort of referenced when he was talking about his wine, which is the idea of freshness. So you have a big Bordeaux style red, either Cabernet based or Merlot based, from a place, Oakville, known to give an enormous amount of fruit concentration. What is the role, and do you even look when the wine's being made? Do you think about the concept that a dense, concentrated red wine like this also needs to be fresh?
Oh, definitely. Oh, there's no doubt about it. You have to use some air integration into the fermentation, the barrel aging, everything of that nature. The wines go stale, and bad wine that has been left in a keg for its entire life that has never been let out. I made that mistake. You open it up and it is a nasty experience. The H2S that is produced in the lees that are in the bottom, it's just a bad experience.
Yeah.
It won't age and it's not wine worthy of drinking.
Yeah, I meant more the idea that a wine needs to be kind of alive, right? It has to have a vibrancy, which maybe is coming primarily from its acidity, but also not just.
I think the aromatics as well. I think picking at the right time is important, because if you wait too long, you can end up with overly ripe character, which is just all plum, all cassis, all it's like almost sappy, sugary aromatics. And you lose out on some of that natural freshness that I think Oakville provides, which is a little bit of sage, a little mint, some dried herb that I think that we have in our wines that really helps to complement and round out and balance that fruit component. It really just gives you that freshness on the nose. And then of course the natural acidity that we have on the palate really helps to provide freshness, because we do have really robust round flavors. It's really silky and dense and rich, and the acidity helps to bring that freshness and balance it out and make it so that it's not a cloying style. It counteracts and it balances the richness so that it's not a heavy wine. It's just a silky wine.
There is something beautiful about a wine that is powerful in its flavor, but kind of weightless, that doesn't sit on you, that has a certain etherealness. I don't know. Right. Lindsay, jump in here. What do you put any value on freshness in Cabernet? Go ahead, Hamilton. Lindsay?
I'm drinking the Hoopes right now, and I think that the glassware makes all the difference in the world as well. Because right now I'm getting a nice bay out of the Hoopes right now, which is totally changing, and it's been in the glass just getting a little bit of air in it for maybe 45 minutes now. And it's absolutely fantastic and soft. And it smells me like where there it is, right on that north side of that hill, where there are big, thick bay trees and the nice, dark, loamy soil that's down on that valley floor.
Nicely said. Lindsay, what were you about to say?
No, I mean, I think for me, freshness is one of the points that actually really distinguishes Napa wines. I think because we have that beautiful heat, we get a lot more freshness out of the fruit in tandem with tannins that help control the aging and the development over time. And so you're, in some ways, compared to a lot of older world regions, I think you do taste a lot of that, what people contribute to jamminess or cherry or some of those bright fruit flavors over time when they blend or age with the tannins. I think that actually keeps the wines younger and ageable for a longer period of time, because you do have that fresh fruit that maybe in earlier years tends to potentially overpower. It allows the wine to have a really nice lifetime and also develop over the life of the wine. I mean, I like to think of it as a living spirit. So with freshness, it won't always be the same flavor profile, but that allows it to sort of, you know, change as we all do, and mute some of the flavors, but still have some strong characteristics of those original fruit flavors when it's an older wine.
Very nicely said. Well, I have to say that when I think about, you know, we started talking about the concept of ageability, and when I think of Oakville wines, and when I think about actually great Napa Valley wines in general, 10 years is a wonderful moment, because the wine is both not yet old, but not quite young. Kind of like all of us. Lindsay's comment reminded me that if you like it in a person, like being somewhere in the middle, if that's an attractive idea, if you like it in a person, it's often something that is a quality that is good in a wine too, being a little bit mature, but a little bit young still. So these wines, the Plump Jack is right, the Kelham is there, the Plump Jack is right on that cusp, and the Kelham is waiting to become that. So thank you, all three of you. This has been a really fantastic tasting. We're very grateful for your participation, and I'll just show again, today we've been tasting this Kelham wonderful 2012, which will be available this fall. The Plump Jack Reserve 2013 Cabernet Sauvignon, which you would have to probably get from the winery, although maybe Oakville Grocery has some of that left. And then the Hoopes 2015. Thank you, all of you, from me, and thank you all who have joined us for this, our wonderful last session of the Great Wines of Oakville. I'm Karen MacNeil, author of the Wine Bible, and I hope you'll enjoy some great Oakville wine soon. Thank you.
Great wine, you guys. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.